Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Litter Media Live. I'm Dan Ramey, and this is Todd Holdren. Good to see you here.
Thank you, Dan. Good to be here.
I saw a post that he made on Facebook here over the weekend about being in Peru, and I thought, what's a kid from Ross County doing in Peru?
Well, that's had an excellent, vacation adventure trip with my daughter.
Well, we're going to talk about that and maybe a few other things as well in the next few minutes. So stick with us. This interview is brought to you by our friends at Pickaway Ross Career and Technology Center Adult Education.
Find a career you love with Pickaway Ross Adult Education. Skilled trades careers are in high demand with no signs of slowing down. Pickaway Ross offers career training programs with expert instructors and hands-on learning tactics to create a variety of opportunities. Visit our website for more information.
Visiting with Todd Holdren, who is the world traveler now. Can we call you Magellan?
I don't know. I haven't been all the way around yet, but I guess he didn't make it either. So
There's still time. There's
That's
still
right.
time. You mentioned about being in Peru. Is this something that just came out of the blue, or you mentioned you talked about it during the holidays last year?
It kind of last minute type thing. My daughter's getting ready to start a new program that will consume some time for her, so she won't be able to travel for a while. But it's something that I have probably wanted to do since I was maybe 13 years old, to see Machu Picchu in Peru, and that courtesy of the National Geographic photos and the Hiram Bingham expedition in 1911 that rediscovered the site, and ever since then it's been kind of on my bucket list to visit.
But you probably wish you would have been a younger man.
Absolutely.
Physically, that is.
At 62, it was quite a challenge, and I guess a shout out to my buddies down at Anytime Fitness, because I've been involved with them for about a year. Thank goodness, because it was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever undertaken as far as a hiking situation is concerned, and the altitude in Peru where this site is located. But it was just a fantastic experience. I survived. I was 30 years older than everybody else in my group, but it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And, spending time with your daughter, priceless.
Did they at any time call you Pappy or anything like that?
I was known as Papa Llama,
Papa Llama
for the entire trip, and they were very patient. And there were several times I'd say, guys, go on, because I'm not going to get lost. We're going up. And it would give me a chance to catch my breath. And I just kind of went at my own pace, because it was a 24-mile trek. And I think one particular day we went up 4,000 feet in one afternoon. Wow. And that was probably the most difficult. But, wow, what a way to cap off this 4-day hike and arrive at Machu Picchu in the morning and see it as it breaks through the clouds and the fog. And it was, like I said, that bucket list, but it was much more enhanced because of the journey to get there.
You see something like that in magazines and pictures on TV. How's it compare in person?
Wow. It's when you get the chance to not only view it, but to also view it from that location that the guy that originally rediscovered it also viewed it from, and then to walk through the site with a tour and to see all the different fixtures that are there that were also appeared in those magazines. And for me, anyway, it was like, okay, I remember this photo, or I remember this site. But it's just, and it's 600 years old, which is just incredible. Our history is so short here in the U.S. as
Right.
far as the western side of our history. And when you compare it to Europe or other parts of the world, we're babies. Mm-hmm. And to be able to do that and to walk on a trail that was constructed 600 years ago, there are a few steps I would recommend they go back and do some work on. And I think I've probably doubled my lifetime number of steps going up and down in these 4 days. But it was just an incredible experience. And it's not for the faint of heart, but I'm sure glad I was able to do that.
Yeah, certainly something that's not OSHA approved.
Yeah,
I would think.
and thank goodness you have walking sticks, and like I said, we could go at a slightly slower pace because it does take time. There were a lot of times that I was on all fours crawling up the steps because of the steepness, but there were about 8 other sites that we saw along the way, and it kind of built your anticipation to when you got to Machu Picchu. It was like, okay, well, this site's got to not be better than Machu Picchu, or surely. But as we went along, it just built that anticipation even more.
Visiting with Todd Holdren, who is a longtime educator here
Yes.
in the Ross County area. But you were telling me before we started the interview about your college days. You had 11 countries in like 20 days, and so this is nothing new for you to go over different borders.
I've really been blessed to have I've had the travel bug, and I think National Geographic magazine laid that groundwork. My Uncle George and Aunt Nyla bought me a subscription when I was 13. Now, truth be known, there was some, topless native women there that probably drew my attention first. But
you like those big earrings?
Yeah,
and everything,
yeah.
right?
When you flip through the pages to cover up that, and they couldn't believe how interested I was in world travel. But I've had a chance to go on my own and with the school. To Europe several times. Did a wonderful trip to Israel a few years back, and last year my daughter and I did Southeast Asia. So it's something that we kind of picked up on through her military experience when she transferred to bases. I kind of says, "Yeah, you need somebody to ride with you to go to that next base," and we did about I think 5 trips here in the U.S. with those moves. And then took a big leap last summer with the Asia trip, and now this trip to Peru, and hopefully Egypt is next. So,
Now, a number of people watching this may not have been out of sight of Ross County, other than a trip to Columbus, or maybe just been to a different state. What do you have to prepare for when you do travel across? Because so much has changed since COVID.
Oh, well, even
And 9/11.
Of course, I'll be honest. The airline industry, I think, is incredible sometimes how they are able to get my bag from point A to point B, and I've never experienced that really bad experience when you do lose luggage. But when you think about all the people that, even like on our little trip to Peru, there were people that fixed our food, and there were people that helped us carry equipment because of the altitude. And there was that guide that has done this 300 times, I think, and he's only 28 years old. And so you have to find companies that are trustworthy and have good reputations. And I think that's what we experienced with the company we used in Peru. But also there are some medical conditions. You need to have some shots ahead of time when you travel in certain areas because of malaria or whatever that country's disease might be. But it's, I think you have to just mainly just take the advice of the State Department in those countries that are no go-to, you don't go to. But there's still a wonderful lot of countries out there that hopefully you take the time and don't be too afraid, because world travel, I've experienced anyway, has just been a true blessing. And there's some really wonderful people out there outside of Ross County. And Ross County has some pretty good folks, but that I've been blessed to meet and to try their food. And sometimes it doesn't always agree with me, but and to see their places and experience their culture a little bit. I think I'm probably a better person for that than what I was prior to the trip.
Yeah. We have a sense of what localism is here. When you get to some place like that, you kind of grasp a sense of what their localism is?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, on our trip to Peru, the very first night, and I'll be honest, we arrived at this little village, and it was a very easy day on the hike. And as I'm coming into the place where our tents are, I really questioned my judgment of doing this trip on that first day. And I thought, I don't know, we've really got the tough days ahead. But that's okay. I made it, and we had a nice meal, and I thought nothing better than a good night's sleep. And, of course, they're just coming out of their winter time down there. So it was like getting dark around 5:15. And so here we are in our tents at about 7 to go to bed. But the Santa Teresa Festival began that week, and it started about 8:30 p.m., and these folks can party all night long. And at about 11, there was a 10-minute break, and at about 5 a.m., there was a 10-minute break. But, there was no other real entertainment there because they had electricity, but no internet service or cell phone service or things like that. And so for them, these religious festivals were a time for the community to get together and have a community meal, but also to celebrate all night long. Mm-hmm. And they celebrated all night long.
So those of you that live in downtown Chillicothe complaining about some of our First Thursday events wrapping up at 9:30, you could have a lot worse.
Oh, there's no doubt. And like I said, the people we met were extremely friendly, and I didn't stay up and party with those people all night long, but boy, I sure enjoyed their music and fireworks at 2:30 in the morning.
Surprise, surprise. You mentioned you hope that Egypt is around the corner for you. What do you want to do when you get there?
Oh, wow. It's one of those, there's so many things to see. I guess if I were to have the perfect trip, it would be to, I want to say the gentleman's name is Dr. Zarqawi, or the former head of the Egyptology there for the country.
Is it Zarqawi?
Zarqawi, maybe.
Yeah.
But he used to have a show that, oh my gosh, he was brutal to his interns and stuff on. But the guy is Egypt history in the persona. To do that trip would be awesome. Probably outside my price range, but just be able to see the Egypt Museum there in Cairo, and then of course see the pyramids, the Sphinx, and then take a cruise down the Nile and end up down at the Lake Aswan, where they moved the temple of Ramesses II, and the statue was up so many feet so it wouldn't be covered over by the lake when the dam was filled. And that's, again, another National Geographic thing to see what I remember when that project was actually being undertaken as a kid, and to be able to see that tremendous. And, just and all along the way at Luxor and at different places, there's just so many sites in Egypt but experiencing also just cruising down the Nile, or I guess up the Nile in that situation. But it's just again, it's one of those bucket list places that you want to, and probably some cheesy tourist thing on a camel in front of the pyramids. Absolutely.
I can see you like you're in Ishtar or something going down the desert. As an educator, it's got to be extra special for you experiencing some of these things and then trying to paint the picture for a group of kids.
Oh, absolutely. When I did teach history, that was to be able to relate some of those experiences and maybe take some of the fear out of these different places. And it's not just a picture or a point on a map. It's a place you've actually been. And for most of our kids, it's something they have not experienced, and maybe they never will, but at least you can paint a little better picture of understanding for them, and just by relating your experiences.
You mentioned that you went to Vietnam and South Asia here not long ago. What was that experience like? Because we're similar in age. Yeah. We remember the Vietnam era.
Yeah. In fact, that was, I always told my kids in class that when I grew up, I was afraid the Soviets were going to drop nuclear bombs, and that I was probably going to be going to Vietnam to fight at some point. All my cousins had gone, and that was kind of something I remember when I told my prayers at night. It was always including about the troops and things like that. Completely different perspective when and unexpected for me anyway. We did north, what used to be North and South Vietnam, now of course all one Vietnam, but there's still a real separation between the folks living in the Ho Chi Minh City, the former Saigon, and up in Hanoi, and how they view each other. Almost, I guess, probably similar to the way folks here in the South view people in the North, and vice versa, and what they think about each other. So there's still a little bit of division there, but man, what wonderful people. And the food, and I'll be honest, the cost of travel was very, very inexpensive. But the thing that really I was struck the most by when we were in both Cambodia and in Vietnam, is I would have these school-age kids run up to me and start talking to me. And of course, my first knee-jerk reaction was, all right, is there some weird pedophile thing going on here that I'm being set up for by the government, and are they trying to entrap me on something? But it was kids practicing their English. And they would introduce themselves and ask me what I was doing, and then you'd notice that there'd be a parent videotaping because they were so proud of their child, speaking English properly to an American, and I was kind of unusual because of COVID. I think not very many Americans have been traveling as much to Southeast Asia, and so at that time, I know the kids in Cambodia that I ran into, is the first American they'd ever met. But it was interesting as they practiced their English, and I would explain, well, I'm here to see and learn about their culture, and I'd ask them, what are you here for? And they said, oh, we're here to practice English. And then I thought, okay, so that's fair enough. But the perspective of the Vietnamese in around Hanoi and in Saigon of the Vietnam War is really interesting. Especially when you tour the former Hanoi Hilton, which is where they kept most of the pilots in Hanoi. And their perspective is it was kind of like a country club for our service people, as opposed to, we know what the reality was, but obviously their propaganda is showing it in a very different light. And to see the presidential palace in Saigon just the way it was in 1975 when the president there bailed and the country collapsed and it was taken over by the North, is really an interesting, it's almost like going to Graceland and seeing Elvis's home as it was on the day he died. Well, the presidential palace was left the same way so that you experience what it was like during that Vietnam era when the war was going on.
Yeah, I can remember vividly seeing CBS News coverage of the helicopters leaving Saigon and all, and how crazy that time was for us.
And the tank coming through the gates, and that tank is sitting on the grounds there. Of course, it's all painted up, and it's a piece of celebration for them because it was in their view, liberation, versus ours is like, the exact opposite of that. But that's the way war is. Right. Different views, different perspectives. So,
I first met Todd with Corky's Raiders. And I have to ask, all these trips that you've made across, have you thought about starting different satellite chapters of Corky's Raiders across the world?
We decided back in 1992, when our last new member was inducted, that there was such a generational difference between the younger guys and the older guys at that point that we were probably going to stop taking in new members at that point. And I just can't imagine that the Corky Raider culture would transfer very well into a different language or not. But I'm sure there are groups out there just like us.
Probably so. I still harken back to one of the Feasts of the Flowering Moons, anything that floats with a boat race, and the entries that you had in that was simply fantastic.
Oh, and I remember our very first experience with that. We really had visions of trying to break the speed record. Yeah. With 15 guys on there and only 4 people paddling. And then we realized, okay, we're going to go more for the fluff and try to be costume and slowest.
Yes.
And I think we were only outdone on the slowest by the floating chess board, I think, that went through where they had to complete their entire chess game before they finished the race.
But you did pass the float I was on, which was sinking at the time. Joe McFadden and I were on there with Mary Schneider, and Mary, you guys were coming along, and Mary says, take me, and they said, no, she wants to come on. We don't want her if she wants to come on. So the funny things that we experienced.
Oh, no doubt. Lifetimes. And that was really a good experience, and we enjoyed building those boats back then, and of course we tried to pile as many people as we could on them, and in fact I think we even had Chip Arledge do a remote broadcast from
wouldn't surprise
one
me.
Boat ride, so during those days Chip was pretty big, and the Raiders were not small guys either, so there was quite a load on that.
I was saying Kevin Prickett leading the way. So, well, Todd, thank you for coming in and sharing this experience with us, because It's not often I get a chance to talk to a world traveler like
Well,
that.
I appreciate that, and I guess I'm just a novice at it, but hopefully to be more accomplished as time goes on.
Very good. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dan.
Todd Holdren, now at Huntington Schools.
Yes.
So thank you again for watching. We'll have another special edition for you coming up soon right here on Litter Media.